It's not about what you have, it's about who you have. It's not about where you live, it's about how you live. And it's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. Ooh-hoo-hoo. Welcome to the Momentasize podcast. Today, we get to walk through the mind of somebody who's done some amazing development projects. She's in Texas, Bryan, Texas, to be specific. And in this conversation, we're going to go through her story, her journey. We're going to talk about her development projects, which are killer. You can go check them out online. But we're also going to touch base on college. We're going to go through how to decide whether or not development is a good game, talk through her frameworks, and just how she was able to create financial freedom for her family through real estate. Without further ado, please help me welcome Katie Neason to the podcast.
Man, great to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I'm super excited to be able to have you on. I just want to start with getting right into it. Katie, what was your first development and what was your favorite development?
Ooh, good question. I would say my first redevelopment was an old building in downtown Bryan. All it had was the brick exterior walls and the roof. It had dirt floors, cistern in the middle, totally gutted. The roof had actually collapsed in. The city made the previous owner put a roof on it before they'd let them sell it. And that was probably the first redevelopment. So it had a bit of a canvas in that it had the exterior walls, but we turned that into 3 tenant spaces, retail on bottom and then office on top.
I love it. So that was the first one. And was that also your favorite one or what?
It's hard to say favorite. My favorite is dreaming up something really cool. And I feel like in our last project, even though I don't know if it translates as well, it was the biggest challenge. So we built a boutique apartment and I wanted to bring back the front porch concept, but I wanted to apply it to an apartment. So it's not a balcony on the back where you store all your junk or you can sit and you have walls and nobody can see you. So it took quite a feat and a lot of research and some help with an architect to figure out how to create front porches, because you got to be able to walk from one door to the next, but still have it as the front porch. I think we did it successfully. So it's probably one of my favorite ideas we've tackled.
So how did you do that? Because you still had to have a full walkway, right, to access each unit. So what did you do?
So it has probably a 12-foot deep area, covered porch area. The walkway is actually next to the front door. So think of a 3-foot clearance from one end to the other. And then past that is basically the front porch area where you can put your table, your chairs, like hang out on your front porch. So the walkway is closest to the building, and then it's like you pass over it, and that's your front porch area.
That's super cool. That's super unique and cool to be able to do something like that. I like that. That's creative. It's unique. And I'm sure it gets a lot of use. I'm sure it gets a ton of use.
Yeah, that's what's exciting, is to actually see the tenants use it like you want. It creates some more management issues. You want them to not use it as storage. So we have a lot of, that's not for an extra freezer. That is for you to enjoy the public space. So, it's a little more management, but it's totally worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really cool, stylish idea. I like that a lot. Tell us a little bit about the portfolio, because I know your first deal was a redevelopment, and you really focus in on redeveloping specifically downtown areas. Talk to us about your portfolio, the value of it, and just unfold. We'll go from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I bought my first intentional investment way back in 2006, and the thought was we were going to do like low-income rentals. And bought a bunch of fourplexes, grew really fast, and figured out super fast. We hated that. We didn't like the tenants. We didn't like the management. We didn't like the asset class. So we sold them all and we pivoted and started doing flips. And we flipped for probably 10 years. And when I say we, it's me and my mom. I convinced her to go on this crazy ride with me around 2010. And so it's just 2 chicks trying to get it done. And so we started flipping houses and we loved it. But my mom has been in real estate for 50 years, been through lots of cycles. We know real estate is a cycle. And so in order to protect ourselves in the flips, every flip had to be able to break even as a rental if something changed in the market and we couldn't sell it. So what that did was throw out all the high-end flips. And it started pushing us to houses that required major renovations that we were buying really cheap, which kept pushing us closer and closer to the downtown area. I'm 4th generation here, been here my whole life. And it was mostly boarded up and blighted almost all of my life. And as we started finding these really cool, beautiful old houses and like just bringing them back to life. It was like hot demand. And so the renaissance for downtown was just growing and building momentum. But we just created a job for ourselves. The whole purpose was to also create generational wealth and cash flow. What we had was a job that we really loved. So we strategically said, if we're going to have cash flowing assets and we know we hate low income, what is it that we want to do? And we decided we love downtown. We were officing downtown. We love being able, even, and in Texas, it's always like 110, right? It's always hot. It's either freezing and nobody can drive or you're sweating like crazy. And we still, in those temperatures, wanted to walk and pick up our permits, wanted to walk to go to lunch, seeing people on the streets, getting to know the owners of the restaurants. Like, we love that. And it was building momentum. So we're like, you know what we want? We want assets that we can use creativity, which is what we did in flipping. And we wanted properties that when people came to town, we wanted to show them off. Those low income fourplexes, like if you came to my town, I wasn't going to be like, hey, let me drive you by this fourplex I own. Like, who cares? So we wanted really cool projects. And the momentum of revitalizing downtowns was kind of sweeping across the country. This was long before COVID. That accelerated it in smaller markets. It actually made it worse in large markets. But this was even before COVID. And people were just like finding identity and comfort inside those small revitalizing downtowns. So we just went full in and said, let's do it. So I Googled how to do small scale development, which at the time I didn't even know those words, but I was just Googling like crazy. There was nothing. I could not find any help. So we started meeting with like our local developers who developed all the neighborhoods in town. Since we've been here a long time, we know all the families, right, that do that. They all said, you're crazy. What you want to do, you can't do, which probably motivated us because, tell me I can't do it. We'll figure out a way. And so it was really hard. And we just started stumbling our way through the process and figuring it out as we went.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes that's the way you got to do it, right? You have to jump off the cliff and learn how to fly, and it sounds like that's exactly what you and your mom decided to do.
Totally. You identify, I do think this is super important. You identify the worst case scenario. You hope it never happens, but once you've come to terms with it could happen, then it's fine to jump out of the plane and fix it on the way down because you know what happens, like if you don't get it fixed before you hit the ground. And I do think that's important, and it's really come up right now because some asset classes are going through probably what is a recession, right? And so you don't want to be in the middle of it and go, oh my God, I never knew this was going to happen. Because that's when people make really stupid decisions about money. Like I can remember probably 5 or 6 years before I started investing in real estate full time, a guy committed suicide in our area because he had a financial crisis and he was too embarrassed to tell his family and he killed himself over it. And I thought, oh my gosh, like if you do not want to get your back against the wall and not have thought through the worst case scenario and do something really stupid in the moment. And so that's my advice to anyone who gets into real estate investing. It's not for everyone. Know what the risks are and just know, shit, if I did it once, I can do it again. If everything falls apart, I'll have more knowledge and I can do it again. And so we just identified what's the worst case scenario. And then we said, let's jump out of this plane. Now, things helped us. The market helped us. The city helped us, which they helped us so much it scared us because we were like, why are they so excited about us doing this? They must know something that we don't know. And so we had the benefit of people helping us along the way, but it was definitely not a structured playbook. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing you said that is really, really valuable was you did set in your real estate journey, you set parameters. You said to yourself, even in that flipping journey, if we cannot turn this worst case scenario, if we cannot flip this and sell it for what we think, does it work as a rental? Because we don't want to all of a sudden be completely underwater or start to lose all this money because we're trying to flip. So I really like that idea of underwriting with parameters around it, not just trying to make a deal work because it's exciting, it's new, and you want to, right? You can make anything look good on an Excel sheet. And so it's really important to be able to underwrite and make it look good. What did the people, I have to ask you, those same people you went to, those same developers you went to who thought you were crazy, what do they think now?
Still think we're crazy. Still, they come downtown for all the events and stuff, and we always run into them, and they still say, you girls are crazy. I can't believe it worked for you. When we tell them about the next project, they're like, that one will never work. You're still crazy. So it's great. Just keeps motivating us. But
Good.
on that fallback plan, that was so important to us when we went into development too. And I'll tell you, we bought 3 lots that had modular homes on them, and we were going to turn them into townhomes. Now, these were going to be the first new construction homes built in my downtown in my lifetime. So it was definitely a higher risk. We didn't know what we were doing. We buy these. They're basically low income rentals, and they cash flow from day one. When we bought them from an old retiring investor. They were cash flowing. We knew, even though we knew nothing about development, we knew if we can't develop it, it's a cash flowing asset that we don't want, but some landlord will target that portfolio and we could sell them and break even. Because the one thing you don't want in real estate is to be forced when you have to sell, right? That's what takes you under, is when you have to sell. If you can hold it for the long term, it'll probably always go up. But if you're forced to sell in a moment in time, you could be in trouble. So we bought these 3 lots. We go to meet with the city. We tell them our vision and what we want to do. They're super excited about it, but they say, hey, do you know that those lots are too small? They're not buildable lots. Like if they were just raw land today, you wouldn't be able to build on them according to the current code. We're like, no, good to know. And then we were doing like 20 foot wide townhomes. And they were like, do you know the minimum width of a townhome is 25 foot? We're like, no. Good to know. And then they said, so let's talk about, we love what you're doing. How can we make this work? So in our downtown, we had 80-foot wide right-of-ways. And that's how they controlled fires back in the day before we had to over-fire sprinkle every freaking thing. We had these 80-foot wide right-of-ways. And they said, you know what? We'll give you part of the right-of-way. It was a corner lot. They're like, we'll give you part of the right of way on both sides. We'll let you build 24 or 20-foot townhomes, and you'll be able to get 7 instead of 5, because our goal was to get 5. Thank God that happened, because 5 was break even. We made all our money on 6 and 7. Yeah, what we learned was that we didn't know what we were doing. There's lots of things that you need to know. What worked for us is the city loved our vision. We were doing what they wanted in an area they wanted, and we worked together to figure it out.
Yeah, I've seen your projects, and you definitely have vision. Was that specific seven lot townhome project a for sale product?
Yeah. So what we do, we want to own 100% of everything we build forever. But like life's too short. It'll take me too long to have enough money to own 100% of everything and actually stay active. So what we do, anything that can be deemed single family, which includes townhomes, we sell. The main reason is you can usually get highest price per square foot, and it's the most profitable if I can sell that to the end user instead of to an investor who's looking at it as a cash flow asset. So we sell those. 1, it creates income. 2, it generates pops of cash that then we can invest and hold a larger portion of our multi-tenant or multi-door projects. So we did sell those. Again, they had never built new construction townhomes in my downtown in my lifetime. So it was 7 projects, but we built the first 3, did a 5-foot break, and then built the next 4. Built the first 3 once they were all under contract. Then we started on the next 4 to try and limit our risk. And we did it with all cash because we were worried about debt. And so looking back on it, that was so dumb. We could have grown so much faster, but that was the way for us to moderate our risk and test the market and make sure we weren't making an emotional based decision, but an educated one.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think that it might, now you said, looking back, it might have been not the best way to leverage, but it still let you sleep at night. It was a good way to do it rather than feel like you're over leveraged. Now all of a sudden, let's say it did turn on you and you got 7 going, that would have been a much worse situation, right? Can you break down those numbers for us? What did you all in, like what did you build it for? Because I know you build nice stuff too. It's not like you're cutting corners here. You're putting together some really beautiful, exciting, like the interiors are really good looking. What did you build them for? What did you sell them for?
Shoot. We're going to have to do a project that's more recent than that one because I don't remember. That was in 2016, so the numbers probably don't apply anyway. So let's talk about the boutique apartment we just finished and got leased up because I know those numbers.
Tell me those numbers.
Yeah, okay. So that project is an 18-unit, mostly studio loft apartment building. That's the front porch one. Yeah. Price per square foot, most expensive construction to date, but that's because we have a whole bunch of square footage that isn't counted because the porch isn't conditioned space, so it doesn't count as the overall project. But the contractors still charge you to build it. So price per square foot. We built that one
What was the
for
price per square foot?
the all-in development cost was about $170.
Yeah,
The
100.
land cost us, I think it was $240,000 for the
Okay.
property itself.
Okay.
And then the construction was $2.4 million.
Yeah.
And I think the soft cost was probably around $300,000. I don't do public math, but those should add up. That's the pre-development,
right in
the
there, right?
design, and the financing cost.
Yep.
And we did another thing that was kind of unique about that, and we actually adjusted a little bit midstream. So most of everything that we build for rentals downtown is studio lofts. So there's no walls, there's no separate bedrooms. It's all, like open space.
Yep.
But most of our tenants are young professionals. We're in Bryan, Texas, which is the home. Bryan College Station is the MSA. You can't tell when you enter one and leave the other. And it's the home of Texas A&M University. That's the largest university in the country. So our primary tenant and buyer of our townhomes are people somehow affiliated with the university. So professors, researchers, staff workers. And a lot of young professionals these days have a partially like out of office, in office relationship, right? So they needed an office space. Well, a studio loft does not give you any office dedicated space. So what we did is we created what we called the urban 2-bedroom. So it's designed as a studio loft. So it has the closet out in the main space, totally set that up as a bedroom. And then we added an additional bedroom that has a door, also a closet in that space. Because what we didn't know is, do they want the office behind a closed door, or do they want the bedroom behind the closed door? And then we stage it out to show them it can still function as a 2-bedroom. Technically, you could have 2 beds, or you could set one space up as an office and the other as a bedroom. And so this one has 6 of those. All the in units are those urban 2-bedrooms, and they were the first ones to go, and at the higher rent point. So what we're learning is there's a little bit more of a need besides just a studio loft, and we got to start thinking bigger about that in those units.
Yeah, and creatively, right? So that you have a unit mix there between, sounds like you have 6 of those urban 2-bedrooms, and then you've got 12 of your studio loft standards. What are you getting for rent on those?
So the urban 2-bedroom is $1,500 a month, and then the larger studio loft is $1,350, and then the smallest studio loft is $1,250 a month.
Nice. So yeah, you're doing really good. I mean, I did the back of the napkin numbers from what you said: $240 for the land, $2.4 million for the construction, $300,000 for the soft costs. I know it's not exact, but we're throwing it out there. What I got is you're about $163,000 into each unit, and if you're getting those types of rents, it's a really good investment. It works really well. It's close to the 1% rule on your end units, so really well done. That's an exciting project.
Thank you. It did not end up as good as we had started, because interesting enough, once we threw the slab down, that was right when rates started escalating and price of materials started escalating. So we were actually $100,000 over budget the day we poured our foundation, which isn't very far into the project. But what we noticed in the middle of that is I started getting texts from people I didn't know saying, hey, can we bid the framing on the project for the slab? Where I couldn't even get a framer to bid it, because one of the challenges of small scale development is the plans aren't repeatable. So a guy who's building a whole bunch of student housing or whatever in our town, he can throw down those without even looking at the plans. But our projects aren't big enough to get like the institutional contractors who are building for the university or the city. Like, we can't afford them. So you're kind of in the middle. You need a guy who's willing to read the plans and execute at a price point that makes sense. And we were having a hard time even finding a framer that we were comfortable with. And all of a sudden we started getting all these bids. So we said, stop all bids, let all subs know we are not letting contracts right now. And we rebid everything out. And all the prices started coming down. And so we were able to finish just $100,000 over budget, which was the original $100,000 that was from the slab, but it recovered nicely. But the one thing that we did that saved our bacon was we were just wrapping up another mixed use that was a construction loan that was floating rate debt, because that's how construction usually works, right? It's floating. And the rates were escalating, and it was not going well. It was a relatively small project, so it turned out fine. But for this one, we went to the bank and said, hey, bank, we want you to fix the rate on
Yep.
day one through all of the construction. And then when it permanently rolls into financing, it'll still be fixed. And much to my surprise, they said yes. And so we have that loan at, I think it's 5.25 is the interest rate, where had it been floating, it would have gotten set around probably 7.5% to 8%. So that also saved our tail. So it turned out great. Definitely opportunities for things to go wrong, but it worked in our favor.
Yeah. I think fixing that debt was one of the key moves, because those who are developing right now and they don't fix the debt, that's one of the big problems, right? We had a similar thing with our 84 unit. We did fix the debt up front. Same with the 24 unit. We did fix the debt. And then I actually did a fourplex where I didn't fix the debt and I had the opposite problem, right? So now all of a sudden your rates are at 7.5, and it's a whole different challenge when you're going through that. So if you have that then at scale, if it's just a fourplex, smaller deal, okay. But if you have that at scale, you can see a big challenge. And that's what is happening with right now. Some of the opportunities that are presenting themselves are new construction where they had floating debt. They can't get absorption has also been a little bit challenging right now because there is still quite a bit of supply coming online, at least in our area. So absorption is on pace, but slower than maybe what you would expect. And so there's a lot of people having a tough time getting that permanent debt in place. So it's really, really nice that to have a loan at 2.25 right now when everything else is at 7% is a big saver.
Yeah. And let me say about that, because for development, now we do small scale development, totally different than agency debt. So agency debt is when you're getting a HUD loan, you have no personal guarantee, and as long as you check the boxes, very much like a conventional loan, as long as you can check the boxes, they'll give you the loan. You have to have reserves, you may have to have rate cap swaps and all of that. It's complicated, but if you check the boxes, they'll give you the loan. If you don't check the boxes, they don't give you the loan. There's not a lot of gray area. So we don't play in that world. Our projects are usually commercial regional banks that are financing our projects. And in development, like your three greatest risks, one is time. 2 is your financing risk. And then 3 is the absorption, which you talked about. You're bringing on new units. Is there demand for them? So to me, the riskiest one, because you have no control over it, is the financing risk. So what we do to eliminate that risk, when we start the construction loan, the permanent financing is already in place. It's going to automatically roll. Now, it's never the loan that we want. The rates are usually going to set higher. The amortization is usually shorter than we want, but we can underwrite it to that number. And we know if it works at that, then it will work. And because it's a regional commercial bank, you can refinance. We always make sure there's no prepayment penalty. But the one thing I would tell people who are small scale developers, do your best to not get a hard money construction only loan. And then once it's totally done, you have to be re-underwritten for a bank. Because even if things are going great, if the bank is no longer making loans to apartments, loans to your mixed use building, loans period, you have zero control over that. So get your permanent financing in place on the front end, so at least you have a fallback plan. And then when the market loosens back up, you can always refinance it into more favorable debt.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When you get into the development game, you're essentially playing a futures game, right? So you're playing a futures of, is my budget actually accurate, right? Can I build this thing for what I'm saying I can build it for, right? Then what's the debt going to be? And if you can, on the debt, if you can secure that up front, whether, even like you said, if you went the HUD route, it takes a long time to get those approved. That agency debt's difficult, but you can get really good terms. So you can get 35-year, you can get, really, really good terms, non-recourse, but it takes a long time, and there's you have to check every single box. Where there's some flexibility with those regional banks, maybe you're not getting a 10-year, like you're not getting it amortized over 30 years like you'd want, but now at least you have it secured. You're able to understand that the one future thing, the debt component, which is a huge part of being able to make a project work, is now secured before you get going. And then the third one is obviously, what are the rents going to be, right? You're taking a future bet on what you think rents are going to be. And you have to really, what we do in our group is we make sure, hey, pessimistically, on the worst case scenario, based on those three things, the budget, the debt, and the rents, if things don't go our way, what does the picture look like? Are we okay? Are we at break even? How much would we have to feed this project? Do we want to feed the project? realistically, meaning, what's happening in the market today without adding much growth, because you can see a lot of times people will project into the future that they're going to get these future rent growths or they're going to get these breaks, but it doesn't always happen that way, right? So realistically, what's going to happen, and then optimistically, what's going to happen. Look at all three of those pictures, and then if you're still happy with it, move it forward. So
yeah, and just remember that if you budget for one of those things to go wrong, that isn't a downside scenario. That's a typical deal. So the problem is when multiple things go wrong. So it's so important to know what is your break even on each of those elements, and what is your break even if, rents are softer than you thought, so absorption is longer than you think, or you have to lower your rents. And if interest rates go up, like what does that look like? Because a lot of people who are in the game right now have never been through a downturn. And their idea is, oh, don't worry. If things go wrong, I'll sell it. But what they don't understand is when the market is bad, there's usually no buyers. Yeah. If you can't get debt, they probably can't either. So really think through lots of things going wrong, not one thing going wrong, because that's just normal when one thing goes wrong. It's when multiple things pile up that makes it a challenge.
Yeah, I love it. I couldn't agree more. Because you specifically focus in on the downtown redevelopment, that's a pretty cool niche. It's a challenging niche. It's something that you have to really be able to, one, look at something, have a vision for it, but two, also make sure that you can understand the city codes, that you can work with them, that you can work through things. What are some of the things that you do when you're looking at a piece of downtown that you want to revitalize or redevelop? What are some of the things that you ask? What are some of the checklists, the due diligence pieces that you go through?
Yeah, I love this. So first off, I want to kind of paint the picture. Our asset class is downtown. Yep. So if you're going to build, let's say, all over the country, you better have a really crystal clear idea and product that you're building, right? Because you don't know the market. You're not living in the market. You don't have intimate knowledge. So if my deal is I build 400 unit apartment complexes, I can do that all over the country if I become an expert in that asset class. I can do that with strip centers. I can do that with single family homes, with build to rent neighborhoods. That's your asset class. For us, our asset class is actually a geographic region. It's like 15 blocks long by 5 blocks wide, and the asset class is downtown. So when a property comes available, it's not like, oh, now we have to build an apartment on it. We have to build a mixed use on it, because that's not our asset class. It is the downtown. We look at it and we say, what makes the most sense for the longevity and the financial economic stability of downtown. So it may be townhomes to sell, it may be a mixed use property, it may be an apartment building, it may be an office building, but that is our asset class, is the actual geographic downtown. The number one question that I get revolves around the premise of, yeah, but you're in Texas, they'll let you do anything. Can I do that in my town? My town won't let me build 20-foot wide townhomes. My town has zoning. By the way, mine does too. So to answer that question, I have like a framework that I call the SAFE framework. So if you're saying, can I build what I want, where I want, in the town I want, and make money, what questions do I need to ask? So number one is strong market fundamentals. So that's the S of SAFE. It doesn't matter what kind of real estate investing you're doing. You need to make sure that you've got population growth, strong, diverse job market, and affordability. Because if people aren't moving there, you're not going to absorb new units because nobody needs a new home, right? And so you want to make sure you have strong fundamental market. Doesn't matter what kind of real estate investing you're doing. Second, you want an action-oriented government. So that's the A. Does your local government actually want redevelopment? And are they taking action? All of them are going to tell you they want it. All of them are going to tell you there's a housing shortage. Very few of them actually will take action to let you build stuff to help solve the problem. So don't trust their words, look for their actions. So ways that you can look for their actions is like in your downtown. It doesn't have to be a downtown. It could just be a revitalizing area, wherever that is in town. Are they spending money to improve it? So that might be upgrading landscaping, upsizing water and sewer so it can be developed, doing some hardscape like taking out the one-way streets and making them two-way, adding public parking, making it more pedestrian friendly. You want to see them spend money first. And then second, are they offering grants? And the best way to know that is just like Google, City of Bryan grants, development grants. They They're not trying to hide it from you. If they've earmarked the money, they want you to spend it. So basically what they're saying is we're spending tax dollars money to improve the area, and we've earmarked money to help developers revitalize the area. If developers don't come in and leverage that, they look like bad stewards of the community's money. So they are incentivized to help you be successful if they're actually taking action first. So then the third one is first movers. Generally, investors are not the first movers in a revitalizing or a growing market. It is usually the owner-occupied people. So in a revitalizing area that is blighted and is now coming back to life, it's usually your business owners. They own their building. They may rent out part of it, but they're running their business out of it. So maybe it's an architect firm. Maybe it's a boutique, a flower shop, but they own the building. They've invested, bought the building, and they're running their business out of it. They're usually the first movers. Now, it doesn't mean as an investor you can't be a first mover and have success. It just means you're taking on a higher risk. And I want an asymmetrical bet, right? I want to have relatively low risk with high reward, not high risk and high reward. So try not to be the first mover. And then the E for safe is envision alignment. If you are building what the city wants you to build in that area of town, they will work really hard to make that happen. So if the town wants pedestrian-friendly businesses and missing middle housing, more heads and beds, and you come in with a 400-unit apartment building, your visions do not align, and they are not going to let you build it. If I want to build my 20-foot wide townhome in a different neighborhood, they are not going to let me do it because that's not what they're looking for in that area of town. So how do you know what your city's vision is? Every jurisdiction does a 20-year comprehensive plan. So Google it. City of Bryan, master plan, comprehensive plan. It'll be way more pages than you want to read. What you're looking for is the area of town that you want to build in. And they will tell you what their vision is for that area. If your visions don't align, they are definitely going to be your enemy because they are trying to prohibit what you're wanting to do. So don't try and show the city that you're smarter than they are. Try and find a city where your visions actually align because it's hard enough to work with them when you're both pulling in the same direction. So if you're wanting to redevelop in your area and you're wondering, is my area ready and can I do it? Those are the questions that you need to ask and research, and that will give you the answer as to whether or not you're able to do it. I can't tell you about your city, but I can tell you what to do to find out in your city.
I love it. I love it. So the SAFE framework is 1, strong market fundamentals, 2, action-oriented government, 3, first mover. You don't want to be the first mover, right? So check on the first movers. And then 4, the E stands for envision alignment, right? Yep. I love it. I love the SAFE framework. I think that that's a really, really good framework. And it just allows you to, if you're in an area, like you said, it allows you to quickly have these data points on whether or not you should be going after spending energy and time into whether or not that's going to work out. So I really, really think that that's a great framework. And thanks for sharing it. I got good notes on that one. Katie, so tell us a little bit more now. You got into real estate in 2006. First and foremost, I'm just curious, why did you decide to get into real estate and go all in?
Yeah. Oh man. Now you're talking about like childhood issues. I've always been entrepreneurial, and I've always been money motivated for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think the reason is my parents were always in real estate. My mom has been a realtor for almost 50 years. My dad was in steel erection for commercial construction. And we were in Texas in the 80s, and we went through bankruptcy. It was, we had the savings and loan crisis, some changes in tax laws, and it was devastating. I blamed that on real estate forever. So even though I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I did not want to do real estate. That was the one thing that I knew. The other thing that I think made me fascinated about money is I can remember driving home on the school or riding home on the school bus, going by this junkyard, and our ski boat was in that junkyard. And I came home and I was like, Mom, why do they have our ski boat? Basically, it had been repossessed, and that's where it ended up. But I saw some business owners in town getting really wealthy during the same time. And I was like, why are some people getting rich And some people like us are losing everything. And so I became super interested in that. So then when I went to college, I knew that I'm the first generation college graduate in my family. I knew I wanted to do that. That was part of my path. Got a job. Forgot about the entrepreneurial spirit, but I did go to work for a bank doing commercial underwriting, which was amazing because I always wanted to talk about money. I was the weird kid, but most people don't want to talk to you about money. So I was in a position where I got to sit down with the highest level of owners and ask them financial questions. And I got to see two companies doing the same thing, some successful, some not. And it was just super intriguing to me. And then I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what it changed for me is it put words and framework around things I had felt my whole life, but I didn't have the vocabulary for. And the one thing that came out of that book that changed my life is I realized my parents grew up super poor and they made a ton of money. And it wasn't real estate that was their downfall. It was that they totally outpaced their financial knowledge. Since then, my parents lost everything. They're worth way more than I am. They've built it all back. They're super financially savvy, but they didn't have that education at that point in time. And I realized I'm in real estate. I understand real estate. I underwrite credits. Like that is my expertise. And the clarity was it isn't the real estate that caused the problem, but that is also why I'm super cautious and want to make sure I know plan B and C, because I know that that is a possibility and I live through that possibility. But real estate really is where my heart and my passion is. And it's where most of my experience is growing up in it my whole life.
I love it. I love it. I love that story. I think that, that's the definition of somebody who always had a growth mindset, right? Had some challenging things happen, continued to think like, why is this happening? How come? Like you had this lens, the growth mindset puts a lens of opportunity and curiosity of, hey, why are some people during this really hard economic time, why are some people making so much money and why are some people not, right? Or why is this happening to, for example, to your family at that time? And you kept that growth mindset on. You then you went to college, which was congratulations on being the first one to make that happen. You then got paid to learn even more, right? You still had that entrepreneurial spirit still inside of you, but now you're doing a stint where you're getting paid to even learn, to sharpen your saws, sharpen your skills. And then all of that, then you had the aha moment. I think many real estate investors or entrepreneurs have used or read Rich Dad, Poor Dad to be a aha moment for the future of them, what they create. So really, really great that you shared that story. And I think that that's a really, really important thing for people to hear, right, as they go through. Maybe we have a lot of young listeners who are trying to figure out what's next or trying to figure out what happens. And I think oftentimes in today's world, we want everything now, right? You have this big ambition. You want it right now. You want to by 25 years old, become a millionaire, or 30 years old, become a millionaire. But as long as you keep a growth mindset, there's a stepping stone to this game. And it might be okay to go and work for somebody else to get paid, to sharpen your saw, right? To gain experience, to put some capital away, and then boom, move forward. You can have an entrepreneurial spirit, work for somebody else for a stint of time, and then go and make your leap. So.
Absolutely agree. I mean, let someone else learn your mistakes on someone else's dime, if at all possible. And even if that is working for an investor, even if you're doing it for free, you're doing it for minimum wages, it will be, people are willing to pay $100,000 for a college education that you'll probably never use. Yeah. But to work for someone for free for 6 months or a year, they think is unreasonable. And I think it's just recalibrating.
Would you call that a brainwash, Katie? Do you think that's a brainwash that people have been fed to them, or what do you think about that?
Absolutely. I totally think that it is the government needs to produce employees so that they can pay into Social Security, they can pay into the tax structure, and they can collect revenue from them. And so that is what they promote. Just like they promoted that stupid food pyramid that it turns out they were wrong about. Like that's what they're promoting. And it's not wrong. That is a great path for a lot of people, but it is not the only path. And so they want you to go and be a high income earner on someone else's payroll because that's the greatest benefit to them. But do not believe that that's the only or the best way. Just know there are other options. And paying $100,000, if you do the return on investment on that, you're probably going to find out that college education today is certainly a horrible investment.
Yeah,
So
I remember being in college. So I was a soccer player, and school was never a thing for me. I had dyslexia always. It actually created a rebellious personality because I just didn't fit well within the school
the
system. Let's
system.
put it that way. Yeah, and it didn't with dyslexia. It just didn't. It didn't essentially align well with the inner genius I had inside. It was just this kind of really, it became this really negative thing because I wasn't good in the school system. So then I would rebel against the school system. And then it just became this cycle of like spending all this time in a system that really wasn't designed for somebody like me. And I think there's a lot of people like that. Right. And so I remember then going and elevating then into college. What got me through it was soccer, a passion, right? I connected. My parents were really smart. They were like, okay, they wanted me to get through school. So they said the only way you can play soccer, the only way I'll drive you to your games, the only way that you're allowed to go and play soccer is if you at least keep the grades that could get you to the next level. So they did that. They supported me. They were able to take me out of a situation that I needed to get out of, move me to California with, I had a great coach, mentors, etc. They got me on track. And then I went to college, again, mainly for soccer. But I remember being there in college and thinking to myself, we were doing this entrepreneurial class. And it was a theory-based class, and it was a simulation of buying a coffee shop on a simulation and then like going through these different things. And I just thought in my head, I was like, okay, the tuition here is like 50 grand a year. If you truly wanted to be an entrepreneur, you could just take that same 50 grand in 1 year, buy a drive-through coffee shop, learn more than you would ever by actually doing it. Even if you were to go bankrupt on it, you would have so many lessons that you could then take on. It would be substantially a better move. And I just think that dream has been sold to too many people without it being, it as an investment in themselves without it actually being thought through, right? And I don't think that a lot of people, even at 18 years old, recognize that when you're signing those student loans, what that means when you're 22 years old, right? So I think it's really important for us to, I'm not saying don't go to college. I'm just saying think through it and don't just go for it blindly, right?
Know what you're getting into. I can give you a real life example. My youngest is 19 years old, and smart kid, does not apply himself in high school. And a lot of that, I blame myself. I taught him. He's been reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad since he was 5. He started his first business when he was five. We didn't know the unintended consequences of really being educated about money. Yeah. And one of them is they underappreciate public education because they realize they're not really getting much from it. Yeah. So he got through, high school fine. We put money in a 529 plan because we weren't smart enough to know that was dumb from when he was born. When he left, he's a junior in high school, I was like, oh my God, we've been adding to this thing since he was born, and it had like $35,000 in it. That was it. Yeah. So I said, you know what? We should pull this out, put it in one of my townhome developments, probably can double it in 18 months. But he had to go explain it to his dad, who my husband is a working cowboy. He is not financially savvy and does not want to be. Yeah. And so it's like, if you can explain it to him in a way that he can understand, that shows me you know what you're doing if we pull your money out of the 529. So he did that. He puts it in. We did double it. So we ended up with $60,000. So it was his decision. I said, son, you can take that $60,000, put it into your college education. It'll probably pay for half of it. You didn't work hard enough in high school for me to go into debt on your behalf. So those student loans for the next 2 years, those are going to be on you. He wants to do real estate. He already knows that, but he really wanted to go to college. He's a social guy. His friends were going to college. We're in a college town. Like, he really wanted to do that. And he had to sit down and run the numbers and assess it. And he was like, Mom, if I do that, and then I go into debt for 2 years, and then I get a job and I pay that debt off, and then I have to save up the $60,000 that I spent on the first 2 years of college, I'm going to be 10 years behind at least. Or at 19 years old, I can take the $60,000 and start investing in real estate. And I'm like, that's the decision. And that's what he chose to do. He took the money. He's investing it in real estate. He attends some classes on campus because it's in our town. So he still gets exposure to that. But he had to decide, what do you want more? And when you run the numbers, it's super clear which one to pick. We didn't make the decision for him. We're going to support him either way. But when he ran the numbers, he's like, dude, I'm going to be 10 years behind. Like, it would be dumb for me to go to college if I know I want to be a real estate investor and give up the 60 grand that you're going to give me and use that towards college. So
I love it. Way to go, Supermama. And I think that it's just the classic, like, one shoe does not fit all, right? So you just have to let people make their own decisions, but provide them with options, right? Like you said, encourage them to run the numbers rather than just blindly go for it. So I love that. I love that a lot, and I think that that's a really cool thing. One other thing I'll say, one thing you said, we had a guy on the podcast a couple weeks ago named Gabe Bowling on the work for free component. He went to college, then dropped out, and he went and worked. A lot of people, they're not willing, like you said, they'll do the college thing to get in $100,000 of debt, but they think that you're being ripped off if you go and work for free for a year. Well, he didn't take that perspective, and he dropped out of college, and then he worked for Marcus and Millichap for 1 year for free, completely pro bono. But he kept his mindset on, okay, rather than this be a thing where they're taking advantage of me, he said, I'm going to take advantage of the situation. I'm just going to ask questions and ask questions and ask questions. And he did that from 21, if I'm correct, from 21 to 22, he worked completely for free. Nothing, all for free, a whole year. Right? A lot of his family, friends, etc., they're probably like, what is this guy doing? What are you doing? You're working for free. Well, that year, working for free sharpened his saw just enough where he could land then a job at Cardone Capital. So he then went at 22, he got a job at Cardone Capital because he had enough underwrite experience, enough commercial experience. He was in that world. He understood it enough that he got into Cardone, and then he became the number one capital raiser for Cardone Capital, and he went from making $0 to $250,000 a year, just like that. So I think that people have to step away from that, hey, I'm working for free, to, hey, how rich am I becoming right here? How rich am I becoming right here? Right. And Gabe's a great example of that. Now he's 27 years old, started doing his own thing, and now he's got $50 million worth of assets under management. So
my gosh.
Yeah.
Great story.
Yeah, pretty cool. So I think that, if you are somebody listening that's young and you're thinking through that and you feel like working for free for somebody might be a ripoff, just look at the end value that you could potentially get. And if you're really passionate and really want to do that, you might just have to work for free for a year. So
yeah, I mean, the whole thing is know yourself, right? If you're not going to leverage that opportunity and you're not going to use it to propel yourself, well, then that would be a waste of time for you to work for free. So know thyself. And then number 2, no one's trying to tell you what to do. We're just trying to make sure that you know the unintended consequences of whatever you choose. And that, I think, is the barrier with college, is kids don't know the unintended consequences because they're just fed one story. So think on your own. Don't let the government or society do thinking for you.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. Think for yourself 100%. Use your gut, use your intuition. You are smart enough. You have an inner genius inside of you. Let's go back to the real estate piece. So today you've done a ton of different real estate. You try to keep everything that you can, right? What does the holdings look like right now?
So we've done 11 development projects since 2016. 5 of those had to be rezoned. We have 5 right now in some phase of development. And some of those were townhomes that we sold, some weren't. I think we have 7 assets right now that we hold for long term. And so we have a boutique apartment, we have an office retail center, we have a mixed use building, and another mixed-use building. Who can keep up? Oh, and another office building. So there's 7 assets that we're actually holding for long-term. And then of our 5 that we're building right now, we've got a mixed-use that we're on the foundation on right now. It's going to be first floor retail. Second floor, I'm going to do short-term rentals, which I don't actually want to do, but it was necessary. It's on Main Street. I got to figure out how to manage that some buck. But the second floor will be all short-term rentals, and the third floor will be all residential lofts. And then we have a couple of townhome developments that we're in the middle of, and a student housing condo project that's walking distance to the university that we'll sell them off individually because that's just not our niche. That's not a good long-term hold for us because it's not in our specialty wheelhouse of downtown.
Student housing condo. So you're going to sell them to investors? You're going to sell them to parents? What are you going to? Who are you selling these to?
Yes. So it's within walking distance, and I think the 2 primary buyers will be the second home for game day. So Aggies who want a place to come. So, and a lot of those end up being parents with kids here. So the kids live in it, but then they still have a place to go for game day. So that'll be a buyer. And then also investor in, that are just really invest in student housing within a mile. Like that's a big deal. If you can be within a mile of the university, there are investors who will lose cash flow because they know appreciation wise, the university will just drive appreciation in that market. And who knows, we had to make it a condo project. They're up, down. They are attached. What we really wanted was for them to be duplexes, top bottom duplexes, and then sell a duplex that's a townhome because it has attached walls. And the zoning wouldn't allow that. But if we made them condos, then it was allowed by right. So each unit has to be sold individually. So that's the route that we're going. But what I hope is that it ends up being a mix of ownership, but there's also super likely that one investor comes in, buys the whole thing, basically converts it to an apartment because they want to control the whole thing, which is, if we were keeping it, that's what we would want. But since it's not in our wheelhouse, we'll sell it. So it could go to one investor who buys everything. But my thought is it will probably go to people who are using it as second homes or for their college kids.
I love it. I love it. For somebody who's listening to us and they're like, hey, I love this. I want to do the redevelopment as well. But their head's spinning a little bit on like, hey, what would be the first step or where would I get started? What do you say to somebody like that? So first, I believe invest where you're invested. Yeah.
So like fall in love with an area, become an expert on the area. If you really know an area and then you read the demographics and the numbers, you're like, that's not even right. Because the numbers can only be consistent to watching trends, but you can know a number better than some third-party data center. So fall in love with that area. Make sure be passionate about what you want to do. I do think that that's important to create better cities. And then start learning. So follow Dirk, follow me on Instagram, and just start becoming familiar with the vision. Go and talk to the city. Share your vision and see if it aligns. And then go find someone who makes what you're wanting to do look really easy and align yourself with them. Work for them, work for free, for money, whatever. But proximity is so important. Get yourself near people who make the next step feel easy, whatever it takes. If that means you got to leave your family for a while, you would probably done that for college anyway. Get up and relocate and be near people who make the next step feel easy.
I love it. I love it. I couldn't agree more. One of the things that once you fall in love with an area, one of the things that provides a ton of advantage, and you can hear what Katie was just saying, if you can understand the zoning and development code in your area that you're in love with, that you're obsessed with, if you can understand that and you can go through those nuances, like I'm not good at school, but I love the development code, right? Because it essentially gives you the blueprint, the rules of the game, what the city has set, right? That 20-year comp plan that Katie talked about, that's a great place to go and study all the pieces, but from a zoning side, read that, learn that, understand that, because then you can get into the zoning. Then all of a sudden, let's say, for example, now you know that you can have, if you wanted to, a minimum lot size square footage is 5,000 square feet. Okay, if I have 5,000 square feet or my minimum square footage, now I could look for houses or houses that I like that maybe have excess land. And if I understand the partition rules and I understand my lot frontage and I understand the zoning and development code, now you can start to see things that maybe other investors don't see. So maybe other investors only see a single family home, but really in reality you have a single family home with 3 more lots behind it, or you have a single family home where you can put an ADU. There's just, once you start learning that code, you can start having lenses on and look at a piece of land in a different way, right? So I think that that's a key way to do it. I mean, that's what happened. You see that with that student housing. You weren't able to do what you wanted under the duplex side, but if you condominiumized them because you knew the code, now all of a sudden you have a deal that works.
Can do it. Absolutely. I mean, many of our deals come off of MLS because I know in my 15 block area, I can take a 125 foot by 50 foot deep corner lot and I can turn that into 6 townhomes. I know that. I can pay housing prices for 6 lots. Yeah. Most people see it and say they want too much for that house, or I can't put enough in it to flip it and get my money back out. So it really is becoming an expert in what you're trying to do.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. Katie, what happens? Because you're right now it's Bryan, Texas, or
Bryan, Texas.
Bryan, Texas. What do you see when you look at Bryan, Texas? You've done 11 projects there now. Is there a long runway for you in the downtown area? I mean, at a certain
Yeah.
point, we're gonna hit
Yep.
there. We're gonna hit essentially. Katie's gonna have developed all of the downtown area, right? So, are you looking then at other downtowns that you like, or are you strictly gonna be there? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So great question. It's actually one that I'm wrestling with right now. My ultimate goal is not to own 50 buildings in downtown Bryan because that would be financially irresponsible, right? Because now I'm geographically bound to one area with all of my investments. But I truly believe we will create better towns if they are being built and businesses are being owned by people who are invested in that community. So I do not have a desire to go to some other town and do what I'm doing here. I would have a desire to, what I want to do is stabilize my portfolio, get it all cash flowing, then take the money from that and invest it into other projects and other people that will give me the geographic diversity that are doing something that I really love. And so, I don't know if that's going to be a partnership. I don't know exactly what that looks like. Maybe I'm just in someone else's syndication, but eventually once my portfolio is built out here, all that revenue will go in diversifying my portfolio rather than just buying more and more and more buildings in my downtown and taking on an outsized risk of geographic. So for sure, especially since I'm like, not everybody should go to college. College doesn't have to crash for absorption to be impacted in my community. Our MSA is 250,000. We have 100,000 students. So if emissions just decline by 2%, it's really going to have a big impact on absorption rates, right? So even though I think it'll be a long time before that flywheel gets to spinning the other way, it is a risk because we are highly concentrated on one behemoth employer, which is the university.
Yeah. Okay, Riley. Riley, cut that out. Cut the university stuff out. Everyone should go to college, specifically in Bryan.
That's what I meant to say.
I love it. I think that that's a really, really good strategy, and I love that. I love that very, very much. Let's pivot a little bit into social media. Like, what got you into social media? Talk to us about that journey, why you're doing it, etc.
Yeah, part of it was when, like I said, when I started doing development, there was no resources. I couldn't find anybody on social media. I couldn't find anybody on the Google. I couldn't find anyone. So we just started posting about what we were doing. And I started getting lots of questions like, hey, I own this land in this town in Timbuktu, USA. I want to build townhomes there. Can I? And I'm like, I don't know. Great question. It's probably a 2-week research project for me, but I empathize with their desire to want to know because I was in the same boat. So initially I was like, hey, here's the steps you need to do. Here's who you need to reach out to. This is what you need to look for. But I became inundated with it, right? But the more we posted, the more it grew, the more people found us, the more people asked us questions. And so it was totally just compounding. And I know that ultimately our generation, like brand, is going to be our greatest leverage. I don't know what that's going to look like. When I started social media, I didn't have clarity, which was a challenge. And then I hired a little girl a young lady who's amazing, who lives in Colorado, who really got storytelling. My biggest problem is I have a hard time knowing what you're going to be impressed by or what you want to see or hear. Like, I just can't see it through other people's lens. And she was able to get the story down and go, this is what people love. And once we did that, like, it just blew up. But my challenge to her was, you're going to have to figure out how to create income for me to pay for you. And so she did. She started troubleshooting that. And she was like, you get so many questions about how to do redevelopment. Like, we need to provide a platform for people to do that. And I was like, yeah, but I don't really like people that much. Turns out I like people who are interested in what I love.
Mm-hmm.
I am challenged by people who want to talk about TV or how to cook something or weather, like, don't care.
Yeah.
And so we started it's still to this day very small because, it's so individualized, but a really small coaching program that I do twice a year, but it's just to give the people the blueprint to figure out, can they do this? Does it make sense? And can they make money? And all of that has been derived from exposure on social media. So my plan is to keep growing that. I don't know ultimately where it will take me, but I know that it will be an asset to me forever. So that's the path I'm going. And man, I love what you do on your social media. I totally just copy it. So thank you very much for the playbook.
Hey, that's the way to do it. R&D is the best thing you could ever do, right? Rip off and
Yes,
duplicate. And
exactly.
very similar for us, right? I was for many times, 6, 7 years, I was like, social media is a distraction. It's a distraction. It's a distraction. And then I had an aha moment. I went to a small mastermind that a friend introduced me to. They started like cracking away at me a little bit there. Then I spent some money on like a big education. I spent like 25 grand into a big education thing, and I went to the first weekend event, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, and I took like massive amounts of notes, started putting into play. It started to make sense to me, right? That branding. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're not actually sharing your story, you're not putting it out there, you're not creating a brand, well, that's a really, really silly thing to do in today's day and age. And so we just started doing it. And very similar, like you put something out, right? How do you storytell? You put something out, see how it works, and then slowly you find this cadence. And very similar to you, we had a tipping point. I was like, do I still keep doing this, or because I'm hitting a wall, or do I invest, double down and invest? And then we brought on some really good people, and they've now helped us really just capture the platform, tell the story, get consistency, and I think that just like you, investing in building a personal brand is a huge thing for entrepreneurs. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you should get started yesterday.
Yeah, totally. Even if you don't, like, you will never regret having a brand that people know, like, and trust you. Like, it's just really no reason not to do it.
Yeah, and then I love your content as well. I love the style. I love the style that you guys have, what you guys do to redevelop. Because many times, what happens with developers, and I've gone through this myself, and I'm growing and maturing. When I was first doing projects, I would look at something, I'm like, it takes so long to get the permits, etc. I'm like, hey, that's good enough. Let's move forward, right? That was sort of my thing as a capitalist entrepreneur. I'm like, that's good enough. Let's move it forward. And what I realized after doing a couple of those, I'm like, hey, I'm not putting my best foot forward here. Just a little more intention, more focus, more thinking, right? Not just saying, hey, it's good enough, but how can we actually really make this the best that we can within our budget? And I had to learn that a little bit the hard way, like, hey, am I really proud of that product we just put out there? Or just saying it's good enough, it doesn't really work. And that's what I like about your vision, right? You're doing things that you're passionate about. You're doing things that you think will be different. Like doing that porch thing, that's an interesting thing, because many developers would say, no, it's going to cost too much, I'm not going to do it. But what's so special about making that decision, fighting through it, working through it, is you now create this really unique situation and a unique style that over time, you said, one, like you said, you can be really proud of, but two, it also stamps in concrete like what you're gonna do for the future. So I love your style. I think that the way that you don't spare an expense on it, and I think that that's actually become part of the success that you're seeing, because while other people are cutting corners, you're really creating a beautiful product. So I commend you for that.
I appreciate that. We can never do everything that we want to. So it's such a fine line between being perfect and getting a project done, right? Yeah. And it's a spectrum, and finding the right point on that spectrum. So we always say, what is going to be the feature of this project that's really cool, that people aren't going to miss, that's going to be really awesome? And then everything else has to be pretty cost effective, right? Yep. Because we can't make every feature amazing and still be economically viable. And so we just have to pick, like, what is that one thing? But knowing that I am going to be eating lunch, and I'm on social media, so all these people know me, right? So I'm going to be eating lunch with my tenants and with my home buyers. There is something about knowing that I'm going to walk around downtown and they're going to be able to point me out and say, hey, and it can either be, hey, I love what you built me, or hey, this place is crap, right? And just knowing that you have to interact with those people will make you perform on a different level. Doesn't mean everything's perfect, doesn't mean everyone's happy, but it definitely makes you think through what you're doing, because you cannot run to another town and hide from those people or never step foot in that town. You will be held accountable.
I love it. I love it. And I think that that's a great way to be held accountable, to see them all the time. So I love that. Katie, what's next as we wrap up? What's next for you? What do you have dreamt up for the next few steps for yourself?
Yeah, well, we have 5 projects under development right now. We're definitely going to finish all of those out. And then I'll probably want to do like a project or 2 a year in my town. Some hold, some sell. And then I'm doing my coaching program. I don't know what opportunities that will bring up. But if I find, like, forever, I have worked for my investors. I have been the worker, the foot on the ground. I have, like served them well. If I find that person in me, I would love to be able to invest in that person in a town where they love doing something similar that can diversify my portfolio. So again, I'm like going through that right now with my masterminds. Like, what does that look like? So it's kind of in transition, but I think that's the direction I'm going.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have no doubt that it's going to work out, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds. I look forward to be able to continue to connect with you, and it's been a great conversation. Thanks for your time on it. Anyone that wants to connect with you, Katie, how do they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Katie Develops. If you're wondering if development is right for you, I have like a 10-page PDF that you guys can just go to katieneason.com/Momentasize.
We'll link it for
and you can download that free PDF, and it's the 5 questions you should ask yourself to see if you are a good fit for development. So if you just like it and you're interested in it, definitely follow me on Instagram. I love you for it. But if you're wondering if it's right for you, those are some questions to get you thinking to see if this makes a sense as a strategy for you.
I love it. And guys, we'll link to all of that. Katie, thanks again for coming on, dropping those nuggets. We're sure going to have you on again soon, and really appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. And with that, guys, we'll see you on the next one.